guys, so today I have an amazing guest on the podcast. Her name is Chinmayi. Am I saying that right? I just want to make sure I'm saying. Okay, perfect. And she is the founder of Simply Neuroscience, and she's also a incoming freshman, I think, at the University of Columbia or Columbia University. And so, Chinmayi, could you just tell listeners a bit about yourself and a bit about Simply Neuroscience?
Sure. I'm a second year student at Columbia University in New York City, where I'm studying neuroscience and medical humanities. I haven't formally declared my major yet, though. We'll do so. Neuroscience in May of 2019, actually the day after I graduated high school, I believe. So it's very much been a project that's sort of in my transition to college and really out of a desire to create a collaborative community for students interested in learning about the brain. So the roots of it are basically in that community aspect. And now the formal mission is it's based on interdisciplinary neuroscience through a framework of education, outreach, and awareness. And I lead the organization as its chief executive officer.
That's awesome. So now just like going into more of Simply Neuroscience, I would love to know just when you got into neuroscience in general.
Yeah, so to be honest, I don't really know a concrete moment in which there was an epiphany or a light bulb. It definitely was a lot of chance events, and I grew into it through my interest in biology, I would say. So I definitely had an interest in learning about anatomy and different parts of the human body through my interest as a biology student. And neuroscience in early high school and elementary school, middle school, is always fits under the umbrella of either biology or psychology. And so I got into neuroscience through biology, to be honest, and found out through this competition called the Brain Bee, which is a neuroscience competition for high schoolers. Found out about it through my local science fair competition. Science fair has been very big part of my life as a science student, obviously. And so found out about neuro through there, went to the Brain Bee, participated, absolutely loved not just the knowledge and the events that were involved in it, but also just the amazing people that I met along the way. I'm still in touch with quite a number of individuals that I've met through the Brain Bees over the years. So my neuroscience interest grew from there, I would say. And so also some really cool exhibits. I saw for the first time a confocal microscope and looked at hippocampal cells at a brain bee. And I just remember thinking, mind blown, pun intended. So that's where it grew out of, I would say. I definitely did not just wake up one morning and go, this is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. Grew into it.
Definitely. And so just like, why do you think you started Simply Neuroscience in general?
I would say that the biggest issue that young neuroscience students face is that there are not many resources, opportunities, events out there that can really cater to our younger audience of neuro enthusiasts. Most of the times, neuroscience is regarded as a highly technical field that you can really only get into maybe later on in college as an upperclassman or in graduate school or as a career option, but not necessarily something that is bite-sized that younger students can think about. It's not really portrayed in that way, but it is. The field is incredibly open to individuals of all backgrounds. And this touches upon the interdisciplinary aspect that Simply Neuroscience really caters to, because neuroscience really has so many branches that touch with so many different fields that there's something for everyone, literally. So if you consider yourself more of a visual art person, the intersection of neuroscience and its implications with art, discussions about ethics, law, medicine, technology, all of these can really present a lot of interesting perspectives to younger students, which was something that, I definitely did not have as many resources accessible to me as a young student going through high school and even into college a little bit as students in the coming years that I've seen after me, later generations, it's weird to say generations, but that I've seen. So that's kind of what really drove me to build Simply Neuroscience, is I wanted to not just bring people together to connect with like-minded individuals, but also create resources and find opportunities to serve the incoming years of students to come after them while learning more in the process. So it's very much, it isn't just we're making these resources, but the people involved in the organization too are really enriched in their own brain journey.
Definitely, totally. And I love how you're almost like trying to help those people that didn't have because like you didn't have this resources right when you were like younger, and so you're trying to like younger generations on what you didn't have, and I love that.
Thank
Now
you.
just yeah, of course. And then like I guess what ultimate like impact do you want Simply Neuroscience to have like in the future?
Yeah, the long-term vision that I had when founding the organization is to create a world, and that's a big word to use, but to create a world in which any individual, any student who's interested in learning about the brain can do so regardless of where they live, what economic barriers they face, their gender or sexual identity, their race, any of these factors, their age even. I don't want those to be limitations for anyone to study the brain, because studying the brain is studying ourselves, and that's really important. It's neuroscience is one of those science fields that is really impactful to us on an everyday level. I mean, obviously, think of chemistry as being really important too, right? But we don't necessarily interact with chemistry too much as it relates to us on a perceivable level on a day-to-day basis. But neuroscience is not like that. It's involved from small scale to large scale every single day. So really, I just want to create a world in which there are so many resources and opportunities abound, and people can get connected to resources for help or educational support when they need it and they're interested in learning about neuroscience. And they don't have to face any difficulties for it. It should be just as commonly presented in schools as biology or chemistry or physics are presented, because it's the future. Honestly, neuroscience is the new frontier, as many people call it.
Definitely, totally. And then what advice would you give to other students that want to do something like this? We're founding an organization to help give younger students what they didn't necessarily have.
I would say that, oh boy, it takes a lot of time to get things off the ground and running. And at times it's really easy to lose sight of the end goal, the end vision, because you're so caught up in the let's get this done today and let's keep on going and that kind of a momentum. So I would say that first of all, you need to really be able to chunk out a very large amount of time and energy out of your personal life as well to really put things going into motion. And if you see a gap in your community, it's best to act on it and go get involved with an existing initiative. Or if there is nothing like that existing, go start something up with your friends and scale it up. Because I think one of the best things that our younger kind of group age cohort or sorts has got the perspective is that we're not going to sit and wait for someone to come and help us out, but we're going to empower ourselves to do that. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. And obviously this applies to anyone of any age, like obviously our younger age group, I think has this value inbuilt into our mindset through school and such. But the time is now to act. And it's such a cliche thing to say, but it really is. I mean, if you see a gap, act on it. Don't just wait for someone to come along and help you.
hmm Yeah, definitely. And I wholeheartedly agree with that as well. And I think it's also important that people like they shouldn't have like I think a lot of people have ideas, right? Or they have these ambitions, but they don't act on it because maybe they're scared of like failure or, their own self-doubt. But I think like you said, it's just really important to just go for it, act on it, and help your community. So I totally agree with that. So now just going on to your mindset in general, I would love to know if you could describe a time when you or your work was criticized and how do you handle that?
Yeah, I definitely a very large part, I would say, is that people undervalue my work because of my age. I'm on the younger side of my college age group. I was on the younger side in later years of high school and a lot of research opportunities and such. I'm 17 years old right now. And the most common thing people will say is, oh, Simply Neuroscience, just like a thing you just started, just for the sake of being a founder or a CEO, that kind of a thing. Or like, what qualifications do you really have to be involved in research or be a neuroscience advocate? That's kind of the biggest criticism or challenge I faced, I would say, is that people will try to kind of bring you down and your work down based on the experiences and background that you have. But honestly, if you have the drive to do it and you feel that you have the skills to do it, you should go for it, right? So I felt that I couldn't just sit around waiting until I was later on in college, until I had a degree, until I was a PhD or an MD student, and to start an organization or build something like this for younger students, because there would have been so many years of students who had gone through and maybe felt the same issues, right? So I get a lot of criticism for starting this organization and doing work in this range, but I think on the bright side, this is, this is already helping so many students. I mean, there are so many wonderful testimonials and just comments and positive feedback that I've gotten from students who maybe attended a Simply Neuroscience event or just stumbled across the website and were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I'm so glad this exists. So, it's not to say that all of the positive feedback, cancels all of like the negative, pulling you down kind of feelings, because they still persist, right? They're hurtful. But I would say that I believe that I'm doing meaningful work and I want to keep putting that out into the world. So I'm going to keep doing that. I'm just going to go with that.
Yeah, definitely. And going back to what you talked about in the beginning, where like a lot of people would criticize you not having qualifications, right, or because of your age. I definitely relate with that because I think a lot of like, especially right now, I know a lot of high school seniors or in general high schoolers, they just keep making nonprofits for the sake of, let's say, like college apps, right? And so a lot of that, yeah, for a lot of times, like that drowns out the ones that are actually trying to make an impact, right, and actually trying to continue on. And I think that's something, like you said, with yours, you're actually doing something with your Simply Neuroscience. It's not just like to be the founder of something or to be the CEO or something, And so I definitely think that's super respectable. And I totally agree with, why people would, or like just maybe even older adults, they would say, oh, you're just doing this, like you said, for the sake of the title or for the sake of whatever it is. But I think you're doing amazing things with Simply Neuroscience. I can't wait to see the future of it as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Now going on to something this is kind of a deep question. So like if you need time to think about it, I totally understand. But what do you think your greatest failure is and what do you think you learned from it?
I would say that, well, I guess maybe weakness, failure, I kind of equate them in some ways. So I would say that two things. One is that I love to get involved in things and I'm super exploratory. And so sometimes it's kind of the balance of, am I spreading myself too thin? That's a big weakness, I feel like, because sometimes I have to like corral myself back, like, no, Chinmayi, you should focus on what you're doing right now and let's think about that later. So I would say that I just love exploring. I have a lot of different interests. For instance, medical humanities was something that I had an interest in high school, but I didn't act upon that until I got to college because I finally had the time to do so and the resources to do so. So it's kind of my little bucket list of things that I want to do, holding myself back and making sure that I continue to put meaningful work out into the world with the things that I'm doing right now instead of taking on more onto my plate I think it's a failure of sorts, a weakness of sorts. So something that I'm actively trying to build on. Another thing I would say is that I wish that I could build Simply Neuroscience as a full-fledged job of sorts. I wish I could, invest 40 hours a week on the organization and build it because it is truly my passion. But unfortunately, alas, it's not the case, right? I'm a full-time student, and as a voluntary nonprofit organization, there's only so much bandwidth that you can have reasonably, because education is, of course, the most important, pressing part of my journey right now. So I guess it's kind of a nagging part in the back of my brain. I wish maybe if I could invest 20 more hours a week on this, that we can make it bigger, better, stronger. But it's a nagging feeling, right? But again, human limitations. There's only so much we can do. And again, we can't spread ourselves too thin or too much on one cause. So yeah, I would say that's sort of a personal failure I feel, is that I wish I had more time in the day to do everything that I wish I could do. But we settle for what's going on right now.
Yeah, definitely, totally. I think a lot of people can relate with that, especially because, I think it's in high school, right, where I'm a senior right now, and lots of people they'll just like do a bunch of clubs just like to get involved, right? But I think sometimes, like you said, like they spread themselves too thin, or it's just very hard to keep a balance, right? Of like, oh, I want to join this club, but then also, I'm in this club already, and so I definitely relate with that as well. But yeah, now going on to just like I guess a little more positive question. How do you want to just keep like improving or motivating yourself in the next year?
Man, there are so many cool things I'm looking forward to this year, and just trying to keep the silver lining of COVID-19 staying at home going on. So I logged in with the Columbia Synapse Zoom, as I mentioned before, on the wrong Zoom account. But Columbia Synapse is a club a student organization that I got involved in last year at Columbia, and they're really, really a great organization. I'm not just saying this because I have personal bias, but rather they're using neuroscience, they're applying neuroscience. So it's very much community building and advocacy for the community of individuals who have brain injury or other invisible disabilities in the greater New York City area. And we have some really cool things coming up this year. I'm involved with events, planning out events and such like that. And I'm honestly excited to see just amazing pioneers in research and be able to interact with them this year and really make a large scale impact and share about brain injury awareness work with students and other individuals, because it's not really commonly addressed, but it is incredibly serious. So that's a little bit of a somber note, but also, we're raising awareness, which is a positive note. So I'm looking forward to that. Columbia University has a core curriculum, which is it's like general education requirements, but rooted in long-standing history related to the humanities. And so I'm taking a couple of core classes this year for school, which one of them is contemporary civilization, exploring what exactly is civilization. So some deep thoughts and deep conversations to come. So I'm looking forward to that. I guess on more personal levels, this is such a small thing, but I'm really looking forward to gardening a lot more this year. I've finally mastered a routine schedule of taking care of my plants in the backyard. So I'm looking forward to being creative, and maybe I'm in the works of trying to create a succulent rock garden right now. So maybe some small scale projects like that to keep myself busy. But yeah, a lot of small scale through larger scale educational events that I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, definitely. And I think gardening is like super fun. And also, I feel like people don't realize how hard it can be, just to keep your plants alive. I
So
remember,
true.
yeah, I remember my mom used to plant just like simple, like tomatoes, I think, in our garden. And even those just took so much time because you had to match, like, okay, how much water do I have to give them in order
Right.
to make sure, right, that it would stay alive for the next season. And so I think that's super respectable, right, that you're into gardening. And then now going on to, I guess, how you balance like your lifestyle with Simply Neuroscience and being a student at Columbia University. I would love to know just how yeah, you like organize yourself or just keep yourself balanced with all that work.
Mhm. Yeah, I touched upon this a little bit before, as in there are some limitations, right? So, but it's intense. I run a pretty packed schedule, but I love what I'm doing, which I think is really important, because some people will fill their schedule up with just things that they're doing for the sake of doing, or they're like, I can't really drop out of this right now. And it feels like torturous, or it feels like obligations, but I'm really glad that all the things that I'm involved in are things that I look forward to logging on to Zoom calls, hour after hour, even if I'm facing Zoom fatigue or things like that, because I'm just really excited to meet with these individuals and do good things out in the world. Just small steps, but do good things out in the world. I would say for balancing time, though, obviously having a wonderful team of individuals, both in Simply Neuroscience and in a lot of different organizations and such, and we all really we pick up where we need each other, right? We balance our time schedules out. If someone has a test this week, I'll take on some more this week. And we really help each other out. It's a very dynamic relationship. With classes too, what I really, really love about college classes is that they're flexible and there's no busy work really. So it is very much, I'm not taking a class because I feel obligated to or I'm required to. Like even the core curriculum, I kind of signed myself up for that when I applied to Columbia and accepted the offer. So even classes like that, timings for classes and how you really plan out your schedule, the flexibility of college really does allow you to do so much more with your time. I feel like in high school, we spend so much time, just the routine chunk of hours and every single day and in school, and that really is not the best, right? We can't just sit in class for 8-9 hours straight. In college, you can mix things up. So I won't just be, doing classwork from 9 to 5, but maybe I'll go to class for a couple hours in the morning and I have a break in between. So I'll head over to virtual research and take care of any lab duties. Then in the evenings, I tend to work on SN. So it's great. It's really difficult to explain it. Google Calendar is my best friend. A lot of color coding and everything on there. but things mesh together very well with a college schedule. So I think that's a really big catalyst of how I'm able to juggle things together.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you said, having that college schedule being super flexible, and I think, are you guys virtual now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like and I'm still in high school, I'm a senior, but we have like a virtual and like hybrid option, and I chose the virtual option, and I surprisingly like really love it because teachers are only obligated to have us on class for like 15 minutes just to tell us what our assignments are and like what to watch or things like that. And I can just get my stuff done, like within the school day, which I love because then I have time right
Mm-hmm.
after school. So I think I definitely agree with you where it's like, you can just work on like you said, your research, 1 hour, or the next you could do some classwork or things like that. And so I think that's amazing. But now going on to, I guess, another like more optimistic question, I would love to know just what you think your proudest achievement is or what you're most proud of.
Oh boy. I I don't really know. I think this is going to be a very broad answer, right? But I think I'm overall just proud of the journey to where I am right now because I'm in a happy place. I'm loving what I'm doing, and it definitely has been a lot of growth personally, professionally, and many different levels from the first day of high school to now where I am in my second year of college. And I think I've really figured out my niche, whether it be science, whether it be research, nonprofit organization. Did not imagine that I was going to do everything with SN when I was in high school anyway. But I think I've reached a place where I feel that my interests are coming out and having a difference in a sustainable way. And I still have the bandwidth to really go out and explore other things in the future, that I'm always evolving, but in a positive direction. And I'm proud that I was really able to get myself on that track where I have a solid base of, I know this is what I'm interested in, this is what I'm not interested in. And now I'm always building into bigger, better, greater things that excite me, that make me curious and think. So I'm not just staying static, I'm dynamic and always building towards something greater now, personally. So I'm really proud of that. Just the journey, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's such a good mindset because I think that's something that a lot of people lose track of is not thinking about like just the end goal, right? Or just what like the achievement. You're also thinking about like the journey. And I think that's so valuable because just this past year, I'm like part of this like Bollywood or like competitive like Indian dance team.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's really fun. It's like I don't have you ever done like Bollywood dance or like Bhangra?
I have two left feet, but I know friends who do, yes.
Yeah, it's so much fun. I love it. But I feel like our team this year, like the captains, they were so focused on like getting first place, right, at a competition or just focused on the achievement. They didn't really like focus on the journey towards that, right? And I think that's something that we really missed because like in the end we only got second. But I just felt like, if we just focus, like you said, more on the journey where I think that's such a good mindset where you're just like proud of the journey that you've taken to now be where you are. And I think that's so important to know because like once you just focus on the end result, I feel like that's just such a bad like mindset to be in. I think if you focus on the journey and you just put all your effort into what you can do now, that's so much more like rewarding and you'll feel more better than if you were just to focus on like getting first place or just the achievement.
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Now going on to like the future, I would love to know what your lifelong dreams are and if you like see yourself going into neuroscience or becoming like a neuroscience or neurosurgeon or something like that.
A lot of big decisions there, right? I would say that I don't know what my perfect future career would be, and that kind of ties into I'm always evolving with my interests and always still exploring. I would say that I do hope to go on to graduate school after I'm finished with my bachelor's degree. I am a big fan of kind of three different areas: science communication, the clinical setting, and academia. So academia being research, clinical setting being, in healthcare as a medical professional, and then science communication in terms of actively engaging with the public through outreach efforts, organizing cool events, science weeks, things like that. So I really hope that my future career could involve and sit at the intersection of those three areas of science. And yeah, I honestly don't know what exactly would fit that. I hope to also learn more along the way in graduate school and iron out my interests there. I think that with formally thinking about the intersection of clinical with academia, that Perhaps an MD PhD route or an MD route would fit my current interests, but we'll see how that changes in the coming years.
Yeah, definitely. And I could definitely see you, like you said, intertwining these three sections that you're interested into neuroscience. And I think you're gonna do so many amazing things. Like I can't wait to see where you're gonna go in the future. But I guess now going on to like a personal mission statement you go by or quote. Do you go by anything like that? Like even if it's just as simple as Nike's just do it or something like that. Anything.
Oh boy, this is a really good question. And I don't know if I haven't not really thought about that before. I would just say that explore. It's just a one word thing. Just explore, because in high school, I think I very rigidly was like, I really like biology and that's about it. But I think I definitely opened my mind up so much more relative to in high school. And that's all just with the motto of just explore. So short and sweet.
Definitely. And then what do you think is the most important thing you learned in high school?
Time management. Touched upon this with college a little bit, but I think looking back, I appreciate high school Chinmayi for really trying to make the most out of the time that she had after coming home from school and just managing a very rigid high school schedule with so many other activities. So time management, I would say, is really big. And when you get into college, if you have those skills really built into your foundation already, you can maximize how many things you want to get involved in and what you want to try out and things like that very well. So that's what I learned.
Yeah, I think that's so important as well because I know a lot of people will just like procrastinate, right, to like the next last second just to like do things. Like I know, for example, some of my friends they'll just wait like months, even though we have like months, right, to do a huge project. They'll wait like till the last week just to finish it. And so I think that's so important. Is just knowing, or like having your time spread where you have like time to do other things and be able to
Right.
manage your time, right? So now just going on to some fun questions. There's no right or wrong answer, but if you could be anywhere in the world right now, where do you think you would be? Or where would you want to be?
I like being home actually. So I might be at home. If it was a normal time, I'd be in New York. I miss New York. New York is a great place to be. It was quite a shift from my home in California to the big city, but it was a vibrant place, and I miss the community there. So I would love to be in New York in a non-COVID time.
Yeah, definitely. And then what do you think, or what is the last book that you read?
Ooh. It was a book called Body of Work. I think the subtitle is like Meditations from the Medicine Lab, something along those lines. Meditations on Mortality. Ooh, dark. But basically, it's a chronicle of a first year medical student, Dr. Christine Montrose, and as she was basically dissecting a cadaver in an anatomy lab, and was a very interesting look into, not just medical school as a science, but also the history of medicine and anatomy dissection. And it falls into the realm of medical humanities, which is what I expressed my interest in previously. So a very interesting read. I highly recommend.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. And then what do you think was the best movie you've seen in the last year, or if not the last year, because I know COVID and everything, just in general?
Oh man, I have no sense of time anymore with the pandemic. Wow. I, hmm. Man, I can't think of a movie off the top of my head, so this is like a side note, but I've been watching a lot of PBS Frontline documentaries recently. And, obviously they're not movies, but they're an hour or so long, so they're pretty reasonable, decent size, and they're produced like movies, honestly. So, yeah, I highly recommend PBS Frontline. They have really useful information.
Yeah, I will definitely check it out because I feel like, with this, normally people would say like the Joker or something, but I feel like this is something different and I'm excited. I'm gonna check that out. And then who do you think your heroes are? And heroes can be anything, right? From like actresses and Nobel Peace Prize winners or just like your parents, anyone.
Man, I love my mom. My mother is a huge support. She is, a lot of my work also centers on women in STEM advocacy, right? And one day I kind of just sat down and realized that my mom was a pioneer in her own right. She was the first female engineer from her hometown to pursue an engineering education. and really fought a lot of barriers. She grew up in India, in a small town, and so she came all the way from there to the United States. Has been a constant support. I would say that my other mentors, well, there's a mentor as well. My other mentors would definitely be the amazing women that I look up to in my research lab settings, both graduate students, PIs, principal investigators, postdocs, everyone is just the amount of support that I receive from my research mentors is honestly, it is an inspiration to continue every single day and always learn and never feel bad that if I make a mistake or I'm not sure. So they've really built that up as a wonderful learning environment in the lab settings. And honestly, just seeing their journeys itself is amazing. So I aspire to be that kind of a mentor when I'm at that further stage in my career.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's so important to have like mentors that make you feel comfortable, right? That you're not scared to make a mistake. You know, they're always going to be there for you. So yeah, I totally agree with those. And then my last fun question before the brain teasers are, what do you do just in your spare time or when you have, yeah, just some free time?
I read, as I mentioned, a book previously. I also mentioned that I like to garden. It's a quite a sizable chunk of time. We have a pretty large garden. So it's about every day I might spend 1 or 2 hours out in the yard, and then on weekends, the whole big ordeal of watering and taking care of the succulents takes quite a few hours. So a large chunk of my time is spent gardening. I practice Taekwondo. It's something that I've been doing for about 6 years, I believe. So very great, workout, let out all of emotions, stress relief, everything. What else do I do? I like to explore new music on Spotify. I keep saying explore so many times, but Spotify is an interesting place to explore during the time of a pandemic when everything is on pause, but music is not. So that's what's keeping me busy.
Totally. I definitely agree with that. I've been listening to so many different types of artists now in like Spotify. Yeah. But yeah, totally agree with those. Now going to some brain teasers. What do you just think about when you're alone or just like alone in your car?
I have not been alone in a car for a very long time. I have not been in a car for so long. But I would say I like to ponder, deep word there. I like to ponder about poetry. It's something that really speaks to me. And going back to medical humanities again, but I feel that as a more of a rigid science student all throughout high school, there were only some forays where I could go venture off and think about science in more abstract ways. But now, as a medical humanities student, and also at the intersection of neuroscience with the broader humanities, I'm really appreciative of poetry. I write occasionally. It's not necessarily like science poetry in any way, but I just like to reminisce, feel nostalgic, and write about it, or just kind of think about it and then write it down later. But yeah, I just kind of drift into my own thoughts in an abstract way.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I wish I was into poetry because I feel like poetry is such a nice pastime, especially if you're able to kind of write your own and like you said, write just your thoughts down or in this like abstract way almost. So I think that's awesome. And now my last question is, what's the most interesting thing about you that I wouldn't learn just from this interview alone?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, Man, I mentioned Taekwondo already. That's covered there. I would say that hmm, this is a really tough question. I'll take a very easy route and say I played soccer for 10 years recreationally, and that's not something people know. I also used to referee for soccer. So I knew all about those yellow red flag violations and everything too. So you can imagine when I'm watching a soccer game on TV, obviously not, FIFA level commentary, but some pretty vivid commentary I can indulge in. So yeah, soccer is great. Soccer, I believe, is better than football. That is my personal opinion. Um, so yeah, I'm a soccer enthusiast.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. That being such a big chunk of your life, I think that's definitely something I wouldn't have learned from this interview alone. So that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on, Chinmai. This was amazing, and I think people are just going to learn so much more about neuroscience and simply neuroscience and just about you in general and your mindset. So it was just awesome talking with you. And do you have any like last notes for listeners or like plugs for Simply Neuroscience Instagram or just social media platforms, etc.?
Well, as a plug for SN, I would love to do so very quickly. Highly recommend checking out the Instagram account at Simply Neuroscience. And I don't just say this because I'm the CEO, obviously, but there is some pretty valuable neuroscience insight and more just content, digestible, easy content. Learn about new research features in neuroscience and such that I think, even if you don't consider yourself a neuroscience lover, that is cool to learn about. So I highly recommend checking out the page, not just as, because it's my organization, but because it has some useful information that might help you out. Outside of that, I would say stay engaged out there, even on Zoom University or Zoom School, and really take time to explore once again.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you again, and thank you to listeners that have listened up till this point. Bye.